The great crystal dome of the Kethmoran war chamber gleamed under the light of 3 suns. Admiral Zex Thul stood before the massive star map. His 4 arms crossed behind his back as he studied the glowing sectors. His silver skin reflected the blue light from the hologram, making him look like a living statue of war itself. Around the curved walls, dozens of military commanders sat in their floating chairs. Each one represented a different fleet that had conquered worlds across the galaxy. Their victories decorated the walls in the form of captured banners and broken weapons from defeated enemies. The Sol sector, Admiral Zex Thul said, pointing one clawed finger at a small cluster of yellow stars. 12 worlds. 7 different species. All of them weak. All of them ripe for harvest. The other commanders leaned forward in their seats. The Sol sector had been discussed many times before, but always dismissed as too far away or too unimportant. Now, with the Kethmoran Empire running low on easy targets, even small prizes looked attractive. The humans control this sector, continued Admiral Zex Thul. Intelligence reports show they have no natural weapons. No armor plating like the Korith. No acid spit like the Venali. They live barely 100 years, which makes them practically infants compared to us. Commander Velkos raised one of his tentacles. What about their technology, Admiral? Zex Thul's laugh was like metal scraping against stone. Primitive plasma cannons. Chemical rockets that move slower than our cargo ships. Their largest warship would fit inside the cargo bay of our smallest dreadnought. In the shadows near the back of the chamber, Elder Counselor Yithsen sat perfectly still. His ancient body was smaller than the others, bent with age that counted in millennia rather than centuries. His eyes, clouded with time, watched the proceedings with growing unease. Furthermore, Admiral Zex Thul continued, these humans have made themselves even weaker by taking in refugees. They share their worlds with species that have nowhere else to go. The gentle Kale, who cannot even defend their own nests. The insectoid Vith, who fled their homeworld when it became too polluted. Several others, all of them useless in battle. The commanders began to mutter among themselves. Taking in refugees was seen as the height of weakness in Kethmoran culture. Strong species conquered. Weak species served or died. The idea of willingly sharing resources with aliens was disgusting to them. Elder Counselor Yithsen slowly rose from his chair. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. He was older than anyone else present. Older than the Empire itself. His word still carried weight, even in these modern times. I advise against this course of action, Yithsen said, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly through the chamber. Admiral Zex Thul's silver skin darkened slightly, a sign of annoyance. Elder, with respect, this is a military matter. These humans pose no threat to our forces. You do not understand, Yithsen replied, stepping forward on legs that shook with age. I have seen the old records. I have heard the stories from the trader networks. There are warnings about this species that go back further than your great-grandfather's nest. Warnings about humans? Commander Velkos laughed. What could they possibly do to threaten us? Yithsen's clouded eyes seemed to focus on something far away. They are called many things in the old tongues. The gardeners. The family makers. The sleeping giants. But there is one name that appears in every warning. In every record, from species that encountered them before us. He paused, looking directly at Admiral Zex Thul. They are called the doom of those who threaten the innocent. The room erupted in laughter from several of the younger commanders. Admiral Zex Thul held up one hand for silence. Elder, surely, you do not believe in ancient superstitions. We have plasma weapons that can crack planets. Our dreadnoughts are the size of small moons. What could one primitive species do against such power? Yithsen walked slowly to the star map. With one gnarled finger, he pointed to the Sol sector. The records speak of humans who died to save single individuals of other species. Beings who threw themselves into hopeless battles not for conquest or profit, but for principles. Warriors who fought with such fury when their loved ones were threatened that they became legends among the stars. Legends and stories, scoffed Commander Velkos. Children's tales. To frighten younglings. I spoke with a Korath trader once. Yithzen continued, ignoring the interruption. His ship was attacked by pirates near human space. A single human vessel came to help. Even though the pirates outnumbered them 10-1. The human ship was destroyed, but not before it sent out a distress call. Within hours, a dozen human ships arrived. Not to seek profit from the situation, but simply because someone needed help. Admiral Zexthal's patience was wearing thin. Elder, even if your stories are true, it only proves that humans are foolish. They waste resources, helping strangers. They throw away lives for no gain. This makes them easier to defeat, not harder. You think their willingness to sacrifice makes them weak, Yithzen said quietly. But what happens when you threaten not just humans, but all the species they have taken under their protection? What happens when you attack not just their worlds, but their family? The old counselor's voice grew stronger as he spoke. The records speak of a terrible thing that awakens in humans when those they love are in danger. They become something that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be bargained with, and will not stop until the threat is destroyed. Every species that has tried to harm the human family has learned this lesson too late. Admiral Zexthul slammed one fist on the command console. Enough! We are the Kethmoran Empire. We have conquered 47 worlds and enslaved dozens of species. No ancient warnings will stop us from claiming what we can take. The other commanders cheered their agreement. The sound echoed off the crystal dome like thunder. Only Elder Counselor Yithzen remained silent, his ancient eyes filled with sadness. Very well, Yithzen said, returning to his seat. But remember my words when the bill comes due. Remember that you were warned about the doom that comes to those who threaten the human family. Admiral Zexthul turned back to the star map, already dismissing the old fool's warnings from his mind. The First Fleet will depart within the week. We will demand surrender from all species in the Sol sector. Those who submit will serve. Those who resist will be destroyed. As the commanders filed out to prepare their ships, Elder Counselor Yithzen remained in his chair, staring at the glowing dots that marked human space. In his long life, he had seen the rise and fall of a dozen empires. He had watched proud species reduce themselves to ash through hubris and arrogance. Now he would watch it happen again. But this time, he feared the Kethmorans were about to awaken something far more dangerous than they could possibly imagine. The die was cast. The fleet would sail. And somewhere, in the depths of space, the sleeping giants would soon wake. Commander Park Myung stood on the bridge of the defense station that guarded the outer edge of Earth's sector. Through the wide windows, she could see the stars that had been peaceful for so long. Now, long-range sensors showed something that made her stomach tight with worry. Confirm the readings, she said to Lieutenant Kim Daeho at the sensor station. Confirmed, Commander. 47 large ships approaching from the Kethmoran Empire, estimated arrival in 6 hours. Park Myung had hoped this day would never come. For 20 years, she had prepared Earth's defenses, always knowing that someone might eventually see their peaceful sector as easy prey. She just never expected it to be the Kethmorans. Send a message to all worlds in the sector, she ordered. Begin evacuation procedures for all civilian populations. Priority goes to families with children and elderly. As her crew rushed to carry out orders, Park Myung thought about what they were protecting. Earth's sector was home to more than just humans. The gentle KL had arrived 15 years ago, refugees from a war that destroyed their homeworld. The Vith had come 10 years later, their own planet poisoned by industrial accidents. There were others too. The Maytal, whose son had died. The Korvani, who fled religious persecution. The Jelnari, whose government had collapsed into civil war. All of them had found homes here, not as conquered subjects, but as family. The communication system crackled to life. A harsh voice spoke in accented galactic standard. Attention! Creatures of the Sol sector. I am Admiral Zex Thule of the Keth Moran First Fleet. You will surrender all worlds and submit to imperial rule immediately. You have 48 hours to comply. Park Mi-young activated the response channel. This is Commander Park Mi-young, speaking for the United Earth Defense Alliance. Earth's sector is home to many species who came here seeking peace and freedom. We offer to negotiate terms for peaceful coexistence. The reply came back filled with cruel laughter. There will be no negotiation. Submit or be destroyed. We have 47 warships. Your primitive technology cannot stand against us. Admiral, Park Mi-young said calmly, any attack on this sector will be considered an assault on our entire family. We ask you to reconsider. Family? The alien voice was filled with disgust. You speak of weakness as if it were strength. You will learn the price of such foolishness. The transmission ended. Park Mi-young closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with new determination. She activated the sector-wide communication network. Attention all residents of Earth's sector. We are facing a threat from the Keth Moran Empire. All non-essential personnel should evacuate immediately. All defense forces are to report to assigned positions. Captain Lee Jinhwan received the message aboard his escort vessel near the KL refugee settlements. Around him, his mixed crew of humans and aliens worked together with practiced efficiency. The KL navigator, Silandra, looked up from her station with large, worried eyes. Captain, what about the children at the settlement? Many KL families cannot evacuate quickly because of the young ones. We'll make sure they get out safely, Lee Jinhwan promised. Signal the other escort ships. We're going to form a protective convoy. As the evacuation began, something beautiful and heartbreaking happened throughout the sector. Humans didn't just save themselves. They stayed behind to help KL families pack their most precious belongings. They carried elderly Vith who couldn't move quickly. They made sure that no one was left behind. The KL children, who had grown up playing with human children, couldn't understand why they had to leave. Parents of both species held each other and promised to meet again when the danger passed. At the main Vith colony, the insectoid workers buzzed with activity. Their leader, Hive Speaker Tickmoth, approached a group of human engineers. Why do you not evacuate? Tickmoth asked. You have shown us the escape routes. You should save yourselves. Chief Engineer Song Hanul looked up from the defense systems she was installing. Someone needs to make sure the colony's life support stays running while you evacuate. Don't worry about us. But you could die. Song Hanul smiled. That's what family does for each other. 20 hours before the deadline, Keth Moran's scout ships entered the sector. They moved toward a convoy of refugee ships that Captain Lee Jinhwan was escorting to safety. The convoy contained mostly KL families and some human volunteers who were helping with the children. Keth Moran vessels, this is Captain Lee Jinhwan. You are attacking civilian refugees. Stand down immediately. The response was a plasma blast that nearly tore off his ship's port wing. More shots followed, aimed at the helpless refugee ships. Lee Jinhwan didn't hesitate. He threw his ship directly between the attackers and the convoy. His shields flared bright blue as enemy fire hit them again and again. Over the radio, he could hear Silandra coordinating with the refugee ships, guiding them toward a nearby asteroid field where they could hide. Sir, our shields are failing, called out Lieutenant Park Ji-hoon from the weapons station. Keep us between them and the refugees, Lee Jinhwan ordered. The other human escort ships did the same thing. They formed a wall of metal and energy between the Keth Moran scouts and the fleeing families. One by one, the human ships took terrible damage, but not a single refugee ship was destroyed. When Keth Moran reinforcements arrived, they found something that confused them. The human ships had been destroyed, But the crews had used escape pods to reach the refugee ships. Instead of fleeing to safety, the humans were helping repair damaged Kale and Veeth vessels. Admiral Zex Thul reviewed the battle reports from his flagship. They protected refugees instead of fighting back? They sacrificed military assets to save worthless aliens? Yes, Admiral, reported Commander Velkos. Our scouts captured some of the human survivors. Under interrogation, they showed no fear. They spoke only of their pride in protecting their family in the sector. Family, Zex Thul repeated with disgust. These humans are even weaker than our intelligence suggested. They waste resources on creatures that serve no purpose. This will make our conquest even easier. But deep in the captured human prisoners, something else was happening. When asked about their strange behavior, the humans didn't speak of military strategy or political goals. They talked about Kale children learning to read human books. They described Veeth workers who stayed late to help human families with construction projects. They spoke of holiday celebrations, where all species shared their traditions. To the Kethmorans, this sounded like madness. Why would anyone risk their lives for beings that weren't even their own species? Why would they call aliens family? The interrogators tried to break the humans by threatening their alien friends. Instead of fear, they saw something that made them uncomfortable. The humans' eyes became hard as stone. Their voices became quiet and cold. "You don't understand," said one captured pilot. "You think caring makes us weak. But you have no idea what happens when someone threatens our children. All of our children." As the 48-hour deadline approached, Admiral Zex Thul prepared for easy victory. The humans had shown they would sacrifice themselves for worthless aliens. They clearly had no understanding of proper military strategy. What the Admiral didn't realize was that throughout the sector, something was awakening. The humans weren't just protecting random refugees. They were defending their family. And when you threaten a human family, you discover that all the warnings in all the ancient records are true. The real war was about to begin. The 48 hours ended with fire falling from the sky. Admiral Zex Thul's fleet began their assault on the outer worlds of Earth's sector, expecting quick surrender. Instead, they found something that made no sense to their understanding of war. Captain Kim Tae-hyung crouched behind the twisted metal of what used to be a communication tower. Around him, plasma blasts turned the ground into molten glass. His squad of mixed human and KL soldiers worked together to evacuate the last families from the settlement. "Sir, we could fall back to the secondary position," suggested Sergeant Lee Minho. "This location is lost." Kim Tae-hyung watched as a group of KL youngsters huddled behind their parents. Their large eyes were wide with terror, but they stayed quiet, like the brave children they were. Near them, human families shared what little water they had left. "Not without everyone," Kim Tae-hyung said firmly. "Check the shelters one more time." This scene played out across dozens of worlds. The Kethmoran forces had expected the humans to fight for strategic positions, for resources, for military advantage. Instead, every human action centered around one goal: protecting the innocent. Dr. Song Hainul coordinated the defense from Deep Space Station Harmony 7. The station's war room buzzed with activity as reports came in from across the sector. But this wasn't like any war room the attacking aliens had ever seen. "Status report from KL Prime," called out Lieutenant Jung Somin. "All civilians evacuated successfully. Captain Park's unit is holding the spaceport until the last transport clears. Vith Colony 7 requests medical supplies," added Commander Yoon Jae-hyun. "They're treating wounded from 3 different species." Song Hanul studied the tactical display. To any normal military commander, the human strategy would look like chaos. They were abandoning valuable positions to save worthless refugees. They were using warships as evacuation transports instead of weapons. They were sacrificing military advantages to protect alien children. But Song Hanuel knew something the Kethmorans didn't understand. The human military doctrine had never been about conquest. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier existed for one purpose: to shield the innocent from harm. "Doctor," called a voice from across the room. It was Silandra, the Kale navigator who had escaped the convoy attack. "My people want to fight alongside yours. We cannot stand by while humans die for us. And my workers have constructed defensive positions," added Tikmoth, the Vith Hive speaker. "We know you told us to evacuate, but this is our home too." Song Hanuel felt a warmth in her chest despite the cold situation. "Very well. But we fight together, as family. No one sacrifices themselves alone." On the Kethmoran flagship, Admiral Zex Thul studied the battle reports with growing frustration. His forces were winning every tactical engagement, but somehow, the victories felt hollow. Every world they took was empty of anything valuable. Every resource they sought had been destroyed rather than captured. "Admiral," reported Commander Velkos, "our ground forces have secured the Kale settlements, but we found no strategic materials, no weapons factories, no military bases." "What did they find?" "Schools, sir. Medical centers. Art galleries. Libraries filled with literature from dozens of species. Playgrounds where human and alien children played together." Zex Thul's silver skin darkened with anger. "What about the industrial centers? Destroyed by the defenders before retreat. They followed a pattern. Evacuate all people first, then destroy anything that might be useful to us. Our forces report finding messages left behind in the ruins." "What kind of messages?" Velkos looked uncomfortable. "Promises, sir. The humans left recordings saying they would return for their friends, that no world would stay in our hands if innocent people suffered." In another part of the ship, Elder Counselor Yithsen sat in his small quarters, listening to the communications from the battle zone. He had access to the prisoner interrogation records, and what he heard there made his ancient heart heavy with dread. The captured humans spoke with voices that grew colder each hour. They described the Kethmoran attacks not as military actions, but as assaults on their family. They talked about Kale children who had been frightened by the bombardment. They mentioned Vith workers who had lost their carefully tended gardens in the explosions. "You don't understand what you've done," one prisoner had told the interrogators. "You think we're fighting for territory or resources. But we're not. We're fighting because you scared our children. You hurt our family. And now you're going to learn why the old warnings exist." Yithsen activated his secret communication device, the one he had hidden from the military commanders. It took several minutes to establish contact with the Human Defense Network. "This is Elder Counselor Yithsen of the Kethmoran Empire. I wish to speak with your leadership." Dr. Song Hanuel's face appeared on the small screen. Behind her, the war room continued its careful orchestration of evacuation and defense. "Elder Yithsen, we know who you are from our intelligence files. What do you want?" "To warn you. As I warned my own people, Admiral Zex Thul will not stop with these outer worlds. He intends to strike at Earth itself, believing that will break your resistance." Song Hanuel's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "Thank you for the warning. Is there anything else?" "Yes. I have seen the old records, the ones my people ignored. I know what happens when humans are truly threatened. Not humans themselves, but their family. I have lived long enough to recognize the signs." "What signs?" Yithsen looked directly into the camera. "Your people are no longer fighting a defensive war, are they? Something has changed in your communications, in your tactics. You're not just trying to protect anymore." Song Hanuel was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made the old alien shiver. "Elder, for 20 years we've built something beautiful in this sector. We've given homes to refugees, raised children together across species lines, and created a true family among the stars. Your people didn't just attack our worlds. They terrorized our children. They destroyed the gardens we built together. They hurt our family." She leaned closer to the camera. "You want to know what's changed? The gardeners are done gardening. Now we protect the garden. By any means necessary." The transmission ended. Elder Counselor Yithsen sat in his quarters, remembering the ancient warnings he had tried to share. The records spoke of humans as gardeners, nurturing other species with infinite patience. But they also spoke of what happened when someone tried to burn down the garden. The sleeping giants were waking up, and when they did, the doom that had been foretold would finally come to pass. Admiral Zex Thul prepared his forces for the final assault on Earth, confident that one decisive blow would end this strange war. He had no idea that he was about to face something far more dangerous than any military force in the galaxy. Humans who were no longer content to just defend their family, but were ready to eliminate any threat to them permanently. The real war was about to begin, and the Kethmorans were about to learn why every ancient warning had told them to stay away from Earth's sector. Admiral Choi Min-seok emerged from the deep space shadows like a ghost returning from the dead. His fleet should not have existed. According to every Kethmoran battle report, these ships had been destroyed weeks ago in the outer system fights. But here they were, appearing on scanners throughout Earth's sector. Vessels that should have been floating debris were instead moving in perfect formation toward the Kethmoran positions. Ships that intelligence claimed were cut off and helpless now bristled with weapons that the aliens had never seen before. Captain Jung Heiji stood on the bridge of the assault cruiser Incheon's Fury, watching enemy formations through the tactical display. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. Half were human, half were from the allied species. All of them had the same look in their eyes, cold determination. "Status report," Choi Min-seok's voice came over the communication system. "All ships ready, Admiral," Jung Heiji replied. "Mixed crews are in position. The Kale engineers have worked miracles with our weapon systems. The Vith tactical specialists have identified weak points in their formation. And our people?" Jung Heiji looked around at her crew. Humans and aliens working side by side, not because they were forced to, but because they chose to defend each other. "Ready to send a message, sir." On the Kethmoran flagship, Admiral Zexthul stared at the sensor readings with growing unease. This was not how the humans were supposed to fight. Where were the desperate defensive actions? Where was the chaos and panic he had expected? "Sir," reported Commander Velkos, "the human fleet is moving into attack formation. But their tactics, I don't understand their strategy." "Explain." "They're not trying to protect anything, Admiral. They're positioning for offensive action against our forward elements. But according to our intelligence, humans only fight defensively." Zexthul studied the tactical display. The human ships were indeed moving with purpose, but not toward any defensive position. They were hunting. Perhaps desperation has finally made them aggressive. No matter. Our ships are still superior in every way. What Admiral Zexthul couldn't see was what was happening inside those human vessels. Captain Jung Heiji walked through the corridors of her ship, observing something that would have terrified the Kethmorans if they had understood it. The humans weren't fighting with desperation. They were fighting with the cold calculation of gardeners who had decided that certain weeds needed to be removed permanently. "Captain," called Engineer Park Na-young, "the Kale team has finished modifications to the torpedo systems. We can now punch through their armor at twice the normal range." "Excellent." "And the boarding teams?" Sergeant Kim Sok-jin looked up from his equipment check. His unit was a mix of human marines and Vith warriors, all of them armed with weapons designed for close combat. "Ready to teach them about threatening our family, ma'am." The first engagement came without warning. Kethmoran patrol ships found themselves facing human vessels that fought unlike anything in their experience. The humans didn't try to outrun superior firepower. They didn't attempt to hide behind asteroid fields or defensive positions. Instead, they attacked with a fury that seemed to grow stronger with every hit they took. When human ships were damaged, their crews didn't retreat. They used the damaged sections as weapons, ramming into enemy vessels, while alien and human voices sang together over the communication channels. Captain Jung Heiji led a boarding action against a Keth-Moran cruiser. As her mixed team fought through the ship's corridors, the enemy soldiers discovered something that shook them to their cores. These humans weren't fighting for conquest or resources. They were fighting with the absolute determination of people protecting their young. Every movement, every tactic, every sacrifice was designed to send one clear message. This is what happens when you threaten our family. Surrender! Jung Heiji called out as her team cornered a group of Keth-Moran soldiers. Your ship is taken! The enemy commander, a tall alien with ceremonial scars covering his arms, snarled at her. You think you have won? There are 40 more ships where this came from. Jung Heiji's expression didn't change. Then we'll take those too. You scared our children. You hurt our family. We won't stop until every one of you understands the price of that mistake. The alien looked into her eyes and saw something that made him step back. This wasn't the face of a conqueror or a soldier seeking glory. This was the face of a mother whose cubs had been threatened, and nothing in the universe would make her stop until the threat was eliminated. Aboard the Keth-Moran flagship, Elder Counselor Yithson watched the battle reports with ancient eyes that had seen too much. Admiral Zex Thul was studying the same reports, but he was seeing only tactical defeats. He didn't understand what was really happening. Admiral, Yithson said quietly, I request permission to open negotiations with the human forces. Negotiations? Zex Thul's voice was filled with outrage. They are destroying our ships. They fight like demons possessed. Yes, Yithson replied sadly, they do. And that should tell you everything you need to know about what we have awakened. The old counselor activated his private communication device again. This time, the face that appeared on the screen was Admiral Choi Min-sok himself, calling from the bridge of a human dreadnought. Elder Yithson, I'm told you've been trying to warn your people about us. I have. But they do not listen to old warnings about old dangers. Admiral, I have lived long enough to recognize what has happened. The humans are no longer fighting a defensive war. Choi Min-sok's expression was calm, but his eyes held depths that made the ancient alien shiver. No, we're not. For 20 years, we built something beautiful in this sector. We welcomed refugees, raised children together, and created bonds that go deeper than species. Your people didn't just attack us. They terrorized our family. And now, we make sure it never happens again. Not to us. Not to our children. Not to any innocent species that seeks shelter in our space. Your empire will learn what the old warnings tried to teach you. The transmission ended. Yithsen sat in silence, knowing that he was witnessing the fulfillment of prophecies written in the stars themselves. Throughout the battle zone, human and allied ships fought with a unity that transcended anything the Keth-Morans could comprehend. KL pilots flew alongside humans in formation so tight, it looked like a single organism. Vith warriors fought beside human marines, with coordination that spoke of bonds deeper than military alliance. But it wasn't just their unity that was destroying the Keth-Moran forces. It was their absolute refusal to accept anything less than total victory. These weren't soldiers fighting for pay or glory. These were family members eliminating a threat to their children. Admiral Zex Thul called for reinforcements from the home fleet, still believing that superior numbers would carry the day. He had no idea that every ship he brought into the sector was just adding to the force that would eventually carry word of defeat back to the Keth-Moran homeworld. The sleeping giants were fully awake now, and they would not rest until the garden was safe forever. The Keth-Moran home fleet arrived like a storm of metal and fire. 200 warships, the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's sector. Admiral Zex Thul stood on his command bridge, certain that such overwhelming power would finally break the stubborn humans. "Signal all ships," he commanded. "Prepare for final assault on the human homeworld." But as the massive fleet moved toward Earth, something impossible began to happen. Ships emerged from every corner of the sector. Not just human vessels, but a mix of everything. Kale science ships, retrofitted with weapons. Vith cargo haulers bristling with improvised cannons. And dozens of other species flying alongside their human family. Captain Lim Soo-young coordinated the response from the bridge of humanity's newest battleship, Terra's Shield. Around her, the command crew represented every species in Earth's sector. The Kale tactical officer worked seamlessly with the human weapons specialist. The Vith engineer shared data with the human navigation team. "Admiral Choi," she reported to the fleet commander, "all ships are in position. Every vessel in the sector has volunteered for the defense, including civilian ships?" "Sir, there are no civilians anymore. Every person, every family, every individual who calls this sector home is part of this fight. The Maytal have turned their passenger ships into medical frigates. The Corvani are using their mining equipment as improvised weapons. Even the Jelnari younglings are helping with communications." Admiral Choi Min-sok felt a warmth in his chest, despite the cold reality of the coming battle. This wasn't just a military operation anymore. It was an entire family rising to defend itself. On the Kethmaran flagship, Elder Counselor Yithsen made one final attempt to reach his admiral. "Zexthul, I beg you to reconsider. What we face is not an ordinary enemy. Look at their formation. Every ship, every person in this sector is united against us. I see prey animals huddling together for warmth before slaughter." Admiral Zexthul replied coldly, 200 ships against whatever ragtag collection they have assembled. "The mathematics are clear. Mathematics cannot measure love," Yithsen whispered, but his words were lost in the noise of battle preparations. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a new star being born. Kethmaran plasma cannons, designed to crack planetary shields, met human defensive formations that seemed to bend but never break. But something was different about this battle from the very first moment. The humans and their allies weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to eliminate a threat completely. Every tactical decision, every sacrifice, every desperate maneuver had one goal: make sure the Kethmaran Empire could never hurt their family again. Captain Lim Soo-young led a coordinated attack that used every advantage their mixed crews could provide. Kale navigators, who had mapped stellar currents for generations, guided human ships through space in ways that confused enemy targeting systems. Vith engineers, who understood swarm mechanics, turned individual ships into parts of a larger organism that moved with impossible coordination. "Focus fire on their command vessel," Soo-young ordered. "The Vith tactical analysis shows that taking out their coordination will fragment their fleet." But as the battle raged, something even more powerful than military strategy came into play. Throughout the Allied fleet, crews began singing. Not human songs or alien melodies, but something new that blended voices from a dozen species into harmonies that had never existed before. The songs spoke of children playing together in station gardens, of elderly humans and young KL sharing stories across species lines, of Vith workers and human engineers building homes side by side, of birthday parties where everyone was invited, regardless of what planet they had been born on. To the Kethmaran forces, the singing was incomprehensible. Why would warriors sing during battle? Why waste energy on music when they should be focused on fighting? But to the defenders, the songs were everything. They were fighting for something worth dying for, and the music reminded them of exactly what that was. Admiral Zexthul watched his superior numbers slowly being ground down by an enemy that fought with impossible determination. His ships should have won through sheer firepower. His technology was more advanced. His warriors were better trained for conquest. But his forces were fighting for duty and fear of punishment. The humans and their allies were fighting for love. "Admiral," reported Commander Velkos, his voice shaking. "Our forward squadrons are reporting something unusual." "Right. Why?" "Wide forward." "What?" "The enemy wounded are not retreating, sir. Ships that should be dead in space are still fighting. Crews are singing as their vessels are destroyed. They're ramming our dreadnoughts while broadcasting messages about protecting their children." Zex Thul stared at the tactical display, watching his overwhelming force slowly being consumed by something he couldn't understand. Impossible. No species fights like this. No rational being sacrifices everything for others. Elder Counselor Yithsen appeared at his shoulder, ancient eyes filled with terrible sadness. "That is why you were warned to stay away from Earth's sector. That is why the old records spoke of doom for those who threatened the innocent. Humans don't fight for conquest or glory. They fight for love. And love makes them unstoppable." As if summoned by his words, a new formation of ships appeared on the scanners. These were vessels that the Kethmorans had never seen before. Massive constructions that seemed to be built from the wreckage of destroyed ships, welded together by crews that refused to give up. Captain Jung Heiji commanded one of these impossible vessels, from a bridge that had been assembled from parts salvaged from a dozen different ships. Her crew was a mix of humans and aliens who had lost their original vessels but found new purpose in continuing the fight. "This is for the Kale children who had nightmares about your bombardment," she broadcasted as her ship rammed into a Kethmoran cruiser. "This is for the Vith gardens you destroyed. This is for every innocent life you threatened." Across the battle zone, similar scenes played out again and again. The Kethmoran Empire wasn't just losing a battle. They were being consumed by the fury of a family that would accept nothing less than the complete elimination of the threat to their children. Admiral Zex Thul finally understood the warnings he had ignored. This wasn't warfare as his people knew it. This was something primal and unstoppable. The rage of gardeners whose garden had been attacked, the fury of parents whose children had been threatened, the determination of a family that would rather die than let evil triumph. "Signal general retreat," he whispered. "Sir." "Signal retriate," he screamed, his voice breaking with the weight of his failure. But retreat was no longer possible. The human fleet had surrounded his forces completely, not to capture them or negotiate, but to make sure that every ship that had participated in threatening their family was destroyed. Elder Counselor Yithsen watched the ancient warnings come to pass. The Kethmoran Empire, built on conquest and fear, was being broken by something it could never understand. The love of one species for all the others it had chosen to protect. The battle ended not with surrender, but with silence. The few Kethmoran ships that survived did so only because the humans let them escape. But they carried with them a message that would spread throughout the galaxy. Earth's sector was forbidden. Not because humans were the strongest warriors, but because they had made themselves into something far more dangerous. They had become the willing sword of every innocent species they loved. Years later, when new refugees sought shelter in Earth's sector, they found a place where children of a dozen species played together in gardens built from the wreckage of enemy ships. They found families that included anyone willing to love and be loved in return. And throughout the galaxy, the old warnings were remembered once again. Never threaten the human family, for the doom they bring is love transformed into an unstoppable force for justice. The sleeping giants had awakened, and the garden was safe forever.